By sunset, the only vehicle strong enough to save her Porsche would be the one she laughed at before lunch. At 10:08 that morning, Weston Harbor Resort looked like a place built to keep weather outside. The glass lobby rose over the edge of Lake Mercer in clean blue reflections, all polished stone floors, white orchids, brass railings, and staff moving quickly with trays of sparkling water for the investors and local officials arriving for the grand opening. Beyond the front entrance, the new marina curved along the shoreline with expensive boats tied neatly to fresh docks, and a row of luxury vehicles sat near the valet lane as if they had been placed there for a magazine photograph. Then Noah Miller pulled in driving a 1994 Ford F-250 with faded silver paint, mud dried along the lower doors, a dent above the rear wheel, and a tow chain hanging from the bed like something nobody in that parking lot wanted to stand too close to. The truck did not arrive loudly. It rolled in with a low diesel rumble, steady and old, the kind of sound that did not ask to be admired. Noah parked near the service lane, cut the engine, and looked once toward the dark clouds gathering over the lake. In the passenger seat, Sophie Miller sat with her small rain boots tucked against the floor mat, holding a blue pickup keychain in both hands. Her mother, Emily, had given it to her before the sickness got too far ahead of the doctors, and Sophie carried it the way children carry things they do not have enough words to explain. Noah was there because Weston Harbor had hired him for launch day logistics, overflow parking, and storm recovery support if the rain became worse than the forecast had promised. He wore a dark rain jacket over a work shirt, jeans worn pale at the knees, and boots that had already seen half the county before most guests finished their first coffee. Across the valet lane, a black Porsche Cayenne rolled to a smooth stop beneath the glass awning. Claire Weston stepped out as two staff members moved toward her with umbrellas. She was 28, composed, bright-eyed, and dressed for a room where people listened when she entered. Weston Harbor Group was her company. Her name on the invitations, her face on the press materials, her money and reputation tied to every polished surface of the resort. Blake Harrington, her event manager, leaned close and said something that made her glance toward Noah's truck. Her smile changed. Not much. Just enough for the people near her to notice. "Is that part of the rustic charm package?" she asked, looking at the old Ford as if it were a prop placed in the wrong scene. A few guests laughed. Blake laughed harder than necessary. Claire tilted her head, eyes moving over the mud tires, the tow chain, the cracked tailgate badge. "That thing looks like it should be retired before someone has to tow it." The words carried farther than she intended. They reached the passenger window. Sophie looked down at the keychain in her hands. Noah heard them too. He did not answer. He only stepped out, zipped his jacket against the wind, and walked around to Sophie's side of the truck. A thin sheet of rainwater had already gathered near the drainage grate at the edge of the lower parking lot, trembling with each new drop from the darkening sky. Noah looked at it for 1 second longer than anyone else did. Then he opened Sophie's door and said quietly, "Stay close, sophomore. This rain is not finished yet." Noah Miller had learned that some insults were only weather. They arrived loud, hit whatever stood exposed, and passed on if a man did not give them shelter. So when Claire Weston laughed at his truck beneath the glass awning of her resort, Noah did not answer. He did not look at Blake Harrington or the guests smiling behind him. He did not point at the tow chain, the reinforced hitch, the upgraded winch tucked behind the front bumper, or the mud tires that had pulled delivery vans, fishing boats, and half the county's bad decisions out of ditches for more than a decade. He only opened Sophie's door, held one hand above her head as she climbed down, and pulled the hood of her yellow raincoat into place before the wind could push it back. Sophie kept the blue pickup keychain closed inside her fist. "Dad," she asked softly, "is our truck ugly?" Noah looked at the old Ford. Rain marked the windshield in uneven lines. The faded silver paint showed where years of sun and salt had taken what they wanted. The front fender carried a scratch from the winter Emily got stuck outside Pine Hollow and Noah drove through freezing rain to bring her home. The truck was not pretty. It had never promised to be. "Pretty does not pull weight, Soph," he said. Steady does. Sophie thought about that, then nodded because her father said things in a way that made them feel like fence posts, plain and strong enough to lean on. Noah zipped her coat the rest of the way and pointed toward the lobby. Stay where you can see me. If Sheriff Brooks comes in, you stay with him. Are you going to move cars? I am going to check where the water wants to go. That was how Noah saw weather. Not as inconvenience. Not as mood. As movement. He had spent too many years answering calls after storms to trust the first calm hour of rain. Water had habits. It found low ground, filled mistakes, tested drains, pushed leaves and gravel where people forgot to look. He walked past the valet lane, past the Porsche with its polished black paint and clean wheels, and down toward the lower parking lot near the marina ramp. The resort staff had placed directional signs for overflow parking there because the view was better, but Noah was not looking at the view. He was looking at the drainage grate where water trembled instead of falling cleanly through. He crouched, touched 2 fingers to the shallow stream crossing the asphalt, and watched it pull backward for half a second before sliding toward the lake road. Blake appeared behind him with a tablet under his arm and a radio clipped to his belt. You checking puddles now? He asked. Noah stood slowly. This lot needs to clear before noon. Blake smiled like he had been given a small local superstition to tolerate. The drainage system is brand new. New does not mean open. Blake glanced toward the lobby, where Claire was greeting county officials under warm lights while Sophie stood just inside the glass holding her keychain. We have investors arriving, Blake said. We are not moving 50 cars because a tow guy does not like the shape of a puddle. Noah looked once more at the grate, at the leaves collecting along the edge, at the black line of clouds pressing lower over Lake Mercer. He did not argue. He only walked back to the Ford, opened the rear toolbox, and checked the tow strap with his thumb. Inside the lobby, Sophie watched him through the glass. Claire did not. Not yet. Noah had been 16 the first time he crawled under that Ford with a wrench in his hand and rainwater dripping off the garage roof into a coffee can by the door. Back then, the truck had belonged to his father, a quiet man named Walter Miller who believed every machine had 2 lives, the one it was built for and the one a patient person could give it after everybody else stopped caring. The Ford was already old when Noah learned to drive it. The bench seat had a tier near the passenger side, the heater worked only when it felt generous, and the silver paint had begun fading along the hood in pale uneven patches. But the engine turned over every morning, the frame was solid, and the 4-wheel drive did not complain when the road turned to mud. Walter taught Noah to listen before replacing parts. A worn bearing had a voice. A loose belt had a rhythm. A truck under load told the truth through the steering wheel if a man knew how to keep his hands still enough to hear it. By 19, Noah had replaced the transfer case with his father standing beside him holding a flashlight. By 23, after Walter's heart gave out one October afternoon behind the hardware store, Noah had installed the first winch himself and spent 2 weekends reinforcing the recovery points because he could still hear his father saying that strength was useless if it had nowhere honest to hold. The truck became work before it became memory. It hauled lumber, pulled base boats up slick ramps, dragged hay trailers through spring mud, and carried broken-down sedans from county roads to repair shops that still paid in checks and handshakes. Emily met it before she married Noah. She was 24 then, working volunteer medical shifts during flood season, and she laughed the first time he apologized for the passenger door sticking. Not the kind of laugh Claire had given it that morning. Emily's laugh had warmth in it. She climbed in, kicked the lower corner of the door exactly the way Noah showed her, and said the truck had character. Later, during storm calls, she rode beside him with a thermos between her boots and a flashlight on her lap, watching him read water over roads the way other people read street signs. She used to say the Ford had a better heart than half the new vehicles in town. When Sophie was born, Emily hung the little blue pickup keychain from the dashboard for 1 week before moving it to the diaper bag, then to Sophie's small hand when their daughter became old enough to love anything that reminded her of her father. After Emily got sick, the truck waited outside hospitals, pharmacies, clinics, and late-night diners where Noah bought coffee he did not want because staying awake felt like the only useful thing left to do. When she was gone, it carried him and Sophie home in a silence so complete that the diesel seemed to lower its own voice. Noah kept the Ford because it worked, but not only because it worked. He kept it because every repair had a name attached to it, every dent had weather behind it, and every upgrade had come from a lesson he had paid for with time, grief, or both. The winch Blake had laughed past had pulled a school van out of a washed-out shoulder the previous spring. The reinforced hitch had held steady when a delivery truck slid sideways near Mill Creek Road. The old mud tires were not pretty, but Noah knew exactly how they gripped on wet asphalt, loose gravel, clay, and the shallow brown water that collected before a road admitted it was gone. Back at Weston Harbor, Noah stood beside the open toolbox in the service lane and ran the tow strap through his hands, checking for phrase the way his father had taught him. Rain tapped the truck bed. Sophie watched from inside the lobby, blue keychain pressed against the glass. The Ford sat under the gray sky with faded paint, a dented fender, and 30 years of being underestimated. It did not look ready for a magazine photograph. It looked ready to work. The rain did not become a problem all at once. It worked the way water always worked, quietly, patiently, taking what gravity gave it before anyone important decided to look down. By 11:26, the lower parking lot near the marina ramp had changed color. The black asphalt was no longer black in places, it had turned mirror gray, reflecting the underbellies of parked cars and the dark clouds pressing low over Lake Mercer. Noah stood near the drainage grate with his hood up and his boots planted in a shallow stream that crossed the painted lines. He watched leaves gather along the metal bars, watched the water hesitate, watched it rise half an inch instead of falling away. That was enough. He walked back toward the glass lobby, passing valet staff who were still smiling because no one had told them the morning had shifted. Inside, Claire Weston stood beneath warm lights beside two county officials and a photographer, speaking about waterfront investment, community growth, and the future of Lake Mercer tourism. Her Porsche was still parked outside near the lower drive, clean black paint shining under rain. Blake Harrington hovered near the entrance with a radio, his eyes moving between the schedule on his tablet and the guests who expected the day to remain elegant. Noah stopped just inside the awning, water dripping from the brim of his hood. "Lower lot needs to clear now," he said. Blake turned first, annoyance already prepared. "We discussed this." "No," Noah said. "You dismissed it." The sentence was quiet. That made it harder to brush aside. Claire heard enough to look over. Her expression stayed polite for the people around her, but her eyes sharpened. "Is there an immediate safety issue?" Noah looked past her to the windows, where the lake was no longer flat. Small waves slapped against the new dock pilings, and rainwater moved down the drive in thin brown lines. "It will be if those cars stay down there another 20 minutes. Blake gave a short laugh and stepped closer, lowering his voice as if Noah were the embarrassing part of the weather. "This resort has a brand new drainage system. We passed inspection last week. We are not interrupting a launch event because you have feelings about puddles." Sophie stood near a lobby column with Sheriff Daniel Brooks, who had arrived 10 minutes earlier after a weather alert went out across the county. She held the blue pickup keychain against her coat and watched her father's face. Noah did not look angry. That worried the sheriff more than if he had. Sheriff Brooks removed his hat, shook rain from the brim, and joined them near the entrance. "Noah is not usually wrong about this road," he said. Blake's smile thinned. "Sheriff, with respect, we have traffic control handled. Weather is not traffic." Claire looked from Blake to the sheriff, then to Noah. For 1 second, she seemed close to listening. Then a staff member touched her arm and whispered that the press walkthrough was ready. Behind her, investors were gathering near the ribbon, cameras angled toward the lobby doors. The resort needed calm. The resort needed confidence. The resort needed the morning not to become a story about poor planning before the first toast. Claire made the choice people make when the visible problem is easier to manage than the real one. Blake, she said, monitor the lot and move vehicles if necessary. Blake nodded as if that settled it. Noah looked back through the glass at the water crawling around the drainage grate. Necessary is already here, he said. No one answered him. Blake lifted his radio and gave instructions about umbrella placement instead of vehicle relocation. Claire turned toward the cameras. Sheriff Brooks stayed beside Noah for a moment, both men watching the same water choose the same path. You want me to call County Road? The sheriff asked quietly. Noah glanced toward Sophie, then toward the old Ford waiting by the service lane with the tow strap coiled in the bed. Call them, he said. And keep people out of the lower drive. Outside, rain thickened against the glass. The drainage grate disappeared under brown water. Blake did not notice. Claire did not turn around. Noah did. By 12:07, the launch event had begun pretending louder than the rain. A string quartet played near the lobby fireplace, servers moved between guests with small plates, and Claire Weston stood near the ribbon with a practiced smile while cameras caught the cleanest angles of the glass, stone, and lake beyond it. Then thunder rolled across Lake Mercer low enough to make the windows tremble. Conversations paused. The rain, which had been falling in steady silver lines, turned heavy and slanted, driven hard against the lobby glass until the view of the marina blurred into gray. Noah stood near the service entrance with Sheriff Brooks, both of them watching the lower drive disappear one painted stripe at a time. The drainage grate was gone now. Water moved over it without slowing, carrying leaves, mulch, and small branches toward the marina ramp. Blake finally noticed when a valet hurried through the side door with rain running off his jacket and said the lower lot was starting to fill. Move the front row first, Blake snapped into his radio, his voice sharp with the panic of a man who had mistaken delay for control. And get Ms. Weston's Porsche up here before anyone photographs it. Noah heard that and looked toward the lower drive. The black Porsche Cayenne sat near the marina entrance, angled perfectly, headlights dark, water already covering the bottom of the tires. A valet started toward it, but Sheriff Brooks raised one hand. No one walks down there without checking depth. Blake turned on him. It is a parking lot, Sheriff. Noah stepped past them, rain hitting his jacket hard enough to flatten the fabric against his shoulders. He walked to the edge of the slope, stopped before the deeper water, and studied the current moving across the asphalt. It was not deep everywhere. That was what made it dangerous for people who did not know how to look. Shallow water over open pavement could turn into a moving sheet where the road dipped near the ramp. Blake did not wait for Noah's assessment. He took the spare key from the valet stand and waved to one of his staff members. Just bring it up slowly. Claire had reached the entrance by then, her expression controlled but thinner at the edges. Blake, she said, are you sure? It is fine, he said. The larger tow company is already tied up at the highway closure, and we are not leaving your vehicle down there for the press. The staff member got into the Porsche and started it. The headlights came on, white beams spreading across brown water. For 3 seconds, it looked as if Blake might be right. The Porsche rolled backward, then turned toward the incline. The front wheels reached the shallow rise and slipped. Not dramatically. Not violently. Just enough to stop progress. The driver tried again, more carefully this time. Water pushed around the tires. The vehicle shifted a few inches and settled lower where the pavement dipped near the marina ramp. Noah's jaw tightened. Stop the engine, he said, loud enough to carry. The driver did. The sudden quiet made the rain sound larger. Through the glass lobby, guests gathered in a silent row, holding champagne flutes they had forgotten to drink from. Sophie stood between 2 lobby chairs, blue pickup keychain pressed in both hands, eyes fixed on her father outside. Claire stepped under the awning and looked at the Porsche, then at the rising water, then at Noah's old Ford parked near the service lane with mud on its tires and a tow strap coiled in the bed. The most expensive vehicle in the lot had become the one thing that could not move. Blake lowered his radio slowly. For the first time that day, he had nothing ready to say. The first thing Noah did was not move the truck. That was what people who did not understand recovery expected him to do. They thought help began with engine noise, with tires turning, with a man rushing toward the problem so the crowd could feel better. Noah knew better. Bad decisions got heavier in water. He stepped to the edge of the lower drive and looked at the Porsche the way a doctor looks before touching a patient, not with panic, not with pride, but with attention. Brown water moved across the pavement in a steady sheet, curling around the tires, carrying pine needles and mulch toward the marina ramp. The Porsche sat at an angle, not buried, not ruined, but trapped in the low pocket Blake had been warned about. Noah crouched just above the waterline and measured the depth against his boot where the current crossed the painted stripe. Then he watched the flow for 3 full seconds. Sheriff Brooks stood beside the awning with one arm out, keeping guests and staff from drifting closer. "Everybody stays on dry pavement," the sheriff said. His voice carried through the rain without becoming loud. Blake opened his mouth as if to object, then closed it when no one looked to him for instructions. Claire stood under the edge of the glass canopy, rain blowing against her blazer, her hair pinned neatly but damp at the sides now. She looked from the Porsche to Noah, and something in her face changed because he was not acting like a man trying to prove a point. He was acting like a man doing a job he had done before, in worse weather, with less attention and no applause waiting at the end of it. "Can you get it out?" she asked. The question came softer than anything she had said to him that morning. Noah looked at the slope, the angle of the front wheels, the water line, the distance to the service lane, and the hitch point under the Porsche's rear bumper. "Yes," he said. He did not add anything else. Claire held out the key fob, but her hand paused for half a second, as if she wanted to say more and could not find a sentence that would fit the distance between her earlier laughter and the man standing in the rain now. Noah took the fob without making her finish. "Sophie stays inside," he said. Sheriff Brooks nodded. "I will keep her with me." Noah looked through the lobby glass. Sophie was standing near a chair, blue pickup keychain in both hands, face pale with worry but still. He raised 2 fingers, their old signal that meant "stay where I can see you." She pressed the keychain to the glass and nodded. Only then did Noah walk to the Ford. The old truck waited in the service lane with rain running down its faded hood and dripping from the tow chain in the bed. Noah opened the toolbox, pulled out a heavy recovery strap, checked the stitching, checked the hook, checked the shackle pin, then laid everything across the tailgate in order. Blake watched from under the awning, soaked at the shoulders, all his polished confidence reduced to a radio that had stopped helping. "The big towing company is still blocked?" Claire asked the sheriff. "Highway washout," Sheriff Brooks said. "Even if they turn around now, they are 40 minutes out." Claire looked at Noah's truck again. "And him?" Sheriff Brooks did not smile. "He is already here." Noah climbed into the Ford and started it. The diesel came alive low and steady, not impressive in the way luxury engines tried to be impressive, but certain, like a tool that had been asked a question it knew how to answer. He eased the truck forward, not toward the deepest water, but toward the shallow edge of the slope where the pavement still held grip. He stopped, stepped out again, and walked the line one more time in the rain. The guests behind the glass grew quiet. Claire's hands lowered to her sides. Noah attached the strap to the Ford first, then carried the other end toward the Porsche with slow, deliberate steps, testing each foot placement before trusting it. He was not thinking about Claire's laugh. He was not thinking about Blake's words. He was thinking about angle, weight, current, traction, and the child watching from behind the glass. Water did not wait for pride to finish learning. So Noah did not wait for an apology before doing what needed to be done. The recovery strap lay across the wet pavement like a dark line drawn between pride and usefulness. Noah checked the shackle at the Ford, then the recovery point at the Porsche, tightening each connection with the same patience he used in his garage when Sophie was asleep and the house was quiet enough for small sounds to matter. Rain ran down the back of his jacket. Water moved around his boots. The Porsche sat still, low and expensive, its headlights glowing white through the brown sheet of water as if it could not understand how a parking lot had become stronger than it was. Noah walked back to the Ford without hurrying. That alone changed the way people watched him. Men who rush make crowds nervous. Men who move carefully make them quiet. Inside the glass lobby, guests had gathered shoulder to shoulder near the windows, their plates forgotten, their glasses lowered, their polished conversations gone. Sophie stood beside Sheriff Brooks with the blue pickup keychain pressed against her chest, her eyes following every step her father took. Claire stood under the awning now, rain blowing across her sleeves, no longer looking like the woman who owned the building. She looked like a woman waiting to learn whether the thing she had mocked could save what she valued. Blake hovered behind her with a radio in one hand, but he did not use it. There was no one left to call who could arrive faster than the man he had dismissed. Noah climbed into the Ford, closed the door, and rested one hand on the steering wheel. He did not rev the engine. He did not make the truck perform for the crowd. He shifted into 4 low, eased his foot onto the brake, and watched the side mirror until the strap lifted from the pavement. First it straightened. Then it tightened. The old Ford gave a low diesel hum that seemed to settle into the asphalt. Mud tires pressed into the wet surface. The truck leaned forward by inches, not lunging, not fighting, only taking up weight slowly enough for the Porsche to follow instead of resist. Outside, the strap drew tight as a drawn breath. Water curled around it. The Porsche moved 1 inch. Then another. The crowd behind the glass did not make a sound. Noah kept his eyes on the mirror, feeling the pull through the frame, reading the weight through the wheel. He gave the truck a little more throttle, just enough. The Ford's rear tires held. The winch assisted in short, controlled tension, not jerking, not forcing, only helping the line stay honest. The Porsche shifted out of the low pocket near the marina ramp and rolled backward toward the shallow rise. Brown water slid off its tires in sheets. Blake took 1 step forward, then stopped because there was nothing useful for him to do. Claire's lips parted slightly, but no words came. Noah adjusted the angle by half a turn, let the truck crawl another 2 feet, paused, checked the strap, then pulled again. The Ford rumbled, old metal carrying old memory, 30 years of work answering a single moment. Sophie pressed her palm to the glass. Sheriff Brooks looked down at her and said something too quiet for anyone else to hear. The Porsche rose out of the water inch by inch until the front tires reached dry pavement. Then the rear tires followed, dripping, glossy, humbled by mud. Noah stopped the Ford, set the brake, and waited for the strap to relax before stepping out. The rain had softened to a steady fall. For 3 seconds, no one moved. The Porsche was safe. The old truck sat ahead of it with faded paint, a dented fender, and water dripping from the tow chain. Nobody looked at the dent anymore. They looked at the truck as if it had been there all morning and they had only just learned how to see it. The silence after the Porsche reached dry pavement did not break the way ordinary silence breaks. No one laughed first. No one clapped first. No one made the easy joke that would let the room pretend this had been entertainment instead of a lesson. The guests behind the glass lobby simply stood there with their plates lowered and their faces turned toward the service lane, watching rain drip from the old Ford's fenders while the polished black Porsche sat behind it, muddy around the tires and breathing steam into the cool air. Noah stepped down from the truck and closed the door without force. He walked to the rear, waited until the strap had gone fully slack, then unhooked it from the Ford and coiled it with the same care he had used before the pull. Not a wasted movement. Not a glance toward the people who had smiled at him before the storm proved them wrong. Sheriff Brooks came out from under the awning and checked the area around the Porsche, then gave Noah a small nod. It was not applause. It was better. It was the kind of respect men give each other when work has been done correctly. Claire stood a few feet away under the edge of the glass canopy, rain touching her shoulders, her face changed in a way no camera could have staged. She looked at the Porsche first, then the Ford, then Noah's hands as he checked the strap for damage. Blake stood behind her, silent now, his radio hanging useless at his side. The building he had trusted, the system he had praised, the schedule he had protected, all of it had needed the man he called a tow guy and the truck Claire had mocked. Sophie pushed through the lobby doors before Sheriff Brooks could stop her, though he followed close enough to make sure she stayed on dry pavement. Noah looked up immediately. "Careful," he said, not loud, just father enough that she stopped at the edge of the awning. She held out the blue pickup keychain in both hands, as if she had been keeping it safe for the truck itself. "It did it," she said. Noah's face softened for the first time all morning. "It helped," he said. "That is what good tools do." Claire heard that. Something in the sentence landed harder than any accusation would have. She looked toward the Ford again through the rain. The driver's door was still open, and from where she stood she could see the small worn sticker beneath the dashboard, faded almost to nothing, the one Emily had placed there years earlier after Noah brought her home through a flooded back road. Beside it hung the empty spot where Sophie's keychain used to swing before it became too precious to leave in the truck. Claire did not know the whole story, but she understood enough to feel the weight of what she had missed. This was not a man clinging to something old because he had failed to reach something new. This was a man who had kept useful things alive because people depended on him. The rain softened. The lobby doors opened wider, and the guests began drifting out in a careful line, not to surround the Porsche, but to look at the Ford. They looked at the mud tires, the winch, the reinforced hitch, the tow chain, the dent above the wheel. The same details had been ugly before lunch. Now they looked like answers. Claire took one step toward Noah, then stopped because apology, for the first time in her day, required more precision than confidence. "Mr. Miller," she said. Noah turned toward her. He did not make it easy. He did not make it cruel. He just waited. Claire looked at Sophie, then back at him. "I was wrong," she said. The words were simple. The room behind the glass heard them anyway. Noah nodded once, not accepting more than she had given, not demanding more than the moment could hold. Blake looked down at the wet pavement. Sheriff Brooks placed his hat back on his head. The old truck sat between them, still faded, still dented, still 30 years old. Nothing about it had become prettier. Only the eyes around it had changed. The contract did not appear that day because Claire Weston suddenly became generous. It appeared because the storm had made the truth visible through glass, water, and one old truck doing exactly what it had been built and rebuilt to do. By 2:18 that afternoon, the ribbon from the grand opening had been moved to a side table, the lobby floor still held faint wet footprints, and the conference room overlooking Lake Mercer smelled like rain, coffee, and the leather folders Claire's legal team had rushed in from the resort office. Noah Miller sat on one side of the table with Sophie beside him, her yellow raincoat folded over the back of her chair and the blue pickup keychain resting in both of her hands. Across from them, Claire sat without the perfect confidence she had worn that morning. Her blazer was dry now, her hair fixed, her voice steady, but none of it returned her to the person who had laughed under the awning. Blake Harrington was not in the room. He had been told to coordinate with county road crews and stay off the decision call until the review was complete, which was a polished way of saying the room had finally learned the cost of listening to him. Sheriff Brooks stood near the window, arms folded, watching rainwater slide down the glass in clear lines. On the table lay a proposal for long-term storm recovery, emergency towing, overflow parking response, and seasonal road monitoring across every lakeside property owned by Weston Harbor Group. The first-year value was $1.2 million, with local subcontracting requirements and a separate drainage improvement fund for the Marina Road and lower lots in town. Claire pushed the folder toward Noah. "I should have listened before the water made me," she said. Noah looked at the document, then at Sophie's hands wrapped around the keychain, then back at Claire. "Listening is cheaper before the storm," he said. No one in the room smiled. Not because the line was cruel, but because it was true. Claire nodded once. "The contract includes your standard recovery rate, priority retainer, equipment maintenance coverage, and the local drainage contribution we discussed." Noah opened the folder and read more slowly than the attorney expected. He checked payment terms, response limits, weather clauses, and subcontractor language. He did not act grateful for being paid fairly. Fair was not a gift. Fair was the floor. "Local drivers get first call if they are qualified," he said. Claire turned to the attorney. "Add it. And nobody gets called just a tow guy in any Weston Harbor meeting again." Claire looked at him then, and for a moment the business language left the room. "Agreed," she said. Sophie placed the blue pickup keychain on the table beside the pen. The small plastic truck looked almost childish against the legal folder, but Claire did not look away from it. Noah signed first, his handwriting plain and steady. Claire signed after him, slower. Outside the glass, the old Ford sat near the service lane with water dripping from the tow chain and mud drying on the tires. It had not become new. It had not become elegant. It had only become impossible to dismiss. When Noah stood, Claire did too. "I am sorry," she said, this time looking not only at Noah, but at Sophie. Sophie did not answer. She picked up the keychain and slipped it back into her pocket. Noah placed one hand lightly on his daughter's shoulder. "Then make sure the town gets the drainage work before the next storm," he said. Claire nodded. That was enough. Later, when Noah started the Ford and eased it out of the resort lot, the same guests who had laughed that morning watched from the lobby windows without speaking. Sophie sat beside him, rain boots swinging above the floor mat, one hand resting on the keychain in her pocket. The truck rumbled down the wet drive, faded silver paint under a gray sky, dented fender catching the last dull light of afternoon. No one laughed when the old truck started again. They were too busy remembering what it had pulled out of the water, and what it had pulled out of them.